She loved him before she knew what that meant. The ballroom smelled like gardenia and polished oak. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across 200 faces she had personally invited. The seating chart had taken her 3 weeks. She'd chosen the menu, negotiated with florists, confirmed RSVPs at midnight while he slept. She knew the name of every donor in that room. Some of them knew hers. She stood near the bar in a dress she'd bought specifically for this. Navy silk, modest neckline, the kind of thing that said professional without saying invisible. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, a vendor confirming tomorrow's breakdown. She answered it because that's what she did. She made things work. She always had. When she looked up, he was crossing the room with his father. She smiled. A real one, the kind that reaches your eyes before you can stop it. She'd spent the afternoon making sure his father's tribute video played without a hitch. She'd rewritten the host's introduction twice. This was her night, too, even if her name wasn't in the program. His father saw her first. Recognition flickered across his face. Warm, familiar. He started to lift his hand. Then his son touched his elbow, leaned in, said something. His father's expression changed. Not dramatically, just a small recalibration, the social smile replacing the genuine one. He nodded, looked past her now, toward someone more important. They kept walking. She stood there with her phone still in her hand, the vendor's voice tinny and distant in her ear. She watched them move through the crowd, his hand on his father's back, proprietary and gentle, protective even, the way you guide someone through a space full of strangers. Later, much later, she would remember the exact shade of the light on the marble floor, the way her heel caught slightly on the edge of a rug, the specific weight of her phone as she slipped it back into her clutch and walked, very calmly, toward the restroom she'd selected for its distance from the main hall. But in that moment, she only felt the floor tilt, just slightly, just enough to make her uncertain whether she was still standing in the same room she'd been standing in 5 seconds ago. This isn't fiction. This is how loyalty dies. Not with a bang, but with a glance that slides past you like you were never there at all. She'd met him 7 years earlier, in the office that still felt too large for the role she'd been hired to fill. Assistant to the VP of Development. It sounded important. It meant she answered phones and organized files and learned very quickly that competence was currency, but warmth was investment. He'd been kind to her from the beginning, not in a way that felt calculated, just naturally, the way some people are kind because it costs them nothing. He brought her coffee on her second day when she was drowning in donor databases, asked about her weekend, remembered she was looking for an apartment, and forwarded her a listing from a friend. "We take care of our people here," he said once, adjusting his tie in the reflection of his office window. She was standing behind him with a stack of contracts, waiting for him to finish a call. He caught her eye in the glass. "That's what my father taught me. Loyalty goes both ways," she believed him. Over the years, the boundaries blurred in the way they do when someone becomes essential. She knew his coffee order, his daughter's birthday, the name of his ex-wife's lawyer. She knew when to push back on a donor call and when to let him take credit for her ideas. She stayed late when he needed her. She came in early when deadlines loomed. She rearranged her life around his calendar because that's what the job required, and because he thanked her every time, and because he meant it. He invited her to his daughter's 8th birthday party, introduced her to his sister as the person who keeps me sane. When his father had a health scare, he called her from the hospital to ask if she could reschedule 3 meetings and send flowers. No, not roses, something brighter. His father hated roses. She stayed on the phone with him for 20 minutes while he talked through his fear in circles, his voice thin and small in a way she'd never heard before. "You're like family," he told her once. They were in a car service, returning from a site visit, the city lights sliding past the window. He'd had 2 glasses of wine at dinner. His guard was down. "I mean that. You know that, right?" She did know. She felt it. It was real. The morning of the gala, she arrived at the venue at 6 a.m. The florist was late. 2 centerpieces had the wrong ribbon. She fixed it. She always fixed it. By the time the doors opened at 7 for the cocktail hour, everything looked effortless. He arrived at 6:45 wearing the tuxedo she'd had tailored for him. He looked good. She told him so. He grinned, adjusted his cufflinks, the ones his father had given him, and squeezed her shoulder. "Couldn't do this without you." She believed that too. In the restroom, she locked herself in the furthest stall and sat on the closed lid. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She looked at them as if they belonged to someone else. Nails painted a neutral shade, no polish chipped, rings she'd worn every day for 3 years. Same hands, different understanding. She replayed the moment. His father's smile, the lean in, the shift. She knew what he'd said. She didn't need to hear it to know. A friend of my father's, a colleague, someone who works for us, not, this is the woman who planned tonight. This is the person who remembers your medications and sends your thank you notes and keeps my entire life from collapsing. Not, she's like family. She sat there until someone knocked on the stall door asking if she was all right. She said yes, she was fine, just fixing her makeup. Her voice sounded normal. She was impressed by that. When she returned to the ballroom, he was at the center of a circle of board members, laughing at something his father had said. He didn't see her, or maybe he did and chose not to acknowledge it. She didn't know which was worse. She stayed until the end. She always stayed until the end. She supervised the breakdown, thanked the vendors, made sure the venue coordinator had her cell number. She answered 3 texts from board members praising the evening. She did her job. At 11:47 p.m., standing in the empty ballroom with the lights half dimmed and the chairs stacked against the walls, she realized she was waiting for him to find her, to say something, to acknowledge what had happened. He didn't come. She went home. The next morning, there was an email in her inbox. Subject line, last night. She opened it standing in her kitchen, coffee brewing, the early light gray and soft through the window. Thank you for everything. The event was flawless. You're incredible. No mention of the moment, no apology, no acknowledgement. Just gratitude, clean, professional, warm. She read it 3 times, then she closed her laptop and poured her coffee. Her hands were still steady. She started noticing things after that. Small things. Things that had always been there, but that she'd interpreted differently. The way he introduced her at meetings. This is my assistant, with a smile that suggested she should be grateful for the recognition. The way he CC'd her on emails but never included her name in the body of the message, as if her presence was assumed, invisible, ambient. The way he asked her opinion on personal matters, his daughter's school, his dating life, whether he should buy the house in the Berkshires, but never on strategic decisions. Those he discussed with colleagues, men, mostly, people whose titles matched or exceeded his own. She'd thought it was trust, that he felt comfortable enough with her to be vulnerable, that she was someone he could rely on. Now she wondered if it was just convenience. She didn't confront him. What would she say? You hurt me at the gala. It sounded petty. You made me feel invisible. He would apologize, surely. He would explain that she'd misunderstood, that his father hadn't recognized her, that he'd been trying to keep the moment smooth. He would make it reasonable, and she would accept it, because that's what she did. Instead, she became watchful. She started cataloging the moments, not consciously at first, just a growing awareness, a new lens through which the familiar became strange. A donor lunch where he told a story about solving a crisis, and she realized halfway through that she had solved it and he'd simply delivered the solution. He caught her eye across the table and smiled. She smiled back. A staff meeting where he praised his director of operations for an initiative she had drafted. The director looked uncomfortable, started to correct him. He talked over her, moved on. Everyone moved on. His daughter's school play, which she attended because he'd asked her to. Get him a ticket, and she'd bought 2, thinking he'd want her there. He arrived late, sat 3 rows ahead, left at intermission without saying goodbye. She stayed for the whole thing, clapped when his daughter took her bow, drove home alone. She started keeping a mental list, then a physical one, in a notebook she left open on her kitchen counter. Not because she planned to do anything with it, just because she needed to see it written down, needed proof that she wasn't inventing her own irrelevance. The list grew longer. The unraveling took months, or maybe it had been unraveling for years, and she'd only just started paying attention. She stopped staying late unless it was truly necessary. She stopped answering emails after 8 p.m. She stopped volunteering for the tasks that weren't technically part of her job description, but that she'd always done anyway. The thoughtful gestures, the anticipatory problem-solving, the emotional labor that had made her indispensable. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Everything okay? He asked one afternoon, standing in her office doorway with his jacket slung over his shoulder. It was 5:30. She was packing her bag. Fine, she said. Just have plans tonight. She didn't. She was going home to eat leftover pasta and watch television she wouldn't remember. But the lie felt necessary, a small reclamation of her time, her life, the parts of herself that didn't belong to him. He frowned. Not angry, confused, as if she'd broken a rule he didn't know he'd written. Okay, he said slowly. Well, see you tomorrow. She nodded. She left. That night, lying in bed, she thought about the gala. She could still see the exact angle of his head when he leaned toward his father, the way his hand moved to his father's elbow, protective, guiding, the same hand that had squeezed her shoulder hours earlier. She wondered if he remembered doing it, if it had even registered as a choice. She wondered if she'd imagined the whole thing, if she was being unfair, overly sensitive, too invested in a relationship that was, ultimately, professional. But then she remembered his father's face, the warmth that disappeared. That hadn't been her imagination. The breaking point came in February. They were hosting a fundraising breakfast. She'd coordinated it, as always, secured the venue, curated the guest list, written the talking points. He'd asked her to attend as his representative. He had a scheduling conflict, couldn't make it himself. You'll be great, he said, casual, distracted, scrolling through his phone. Just smile and make everyone feel important. You're good at that. She went. She smiled. She made everyone feel important. Afterward, she received an email from one of the donors, a woman she'd worked with for years, someone who'd always been kind to her. It was lovely to see you this morning, the email read. Though I was sorry your boss couldn't make it. I didn't realize you were just filling in. I thought you were more involved in the work than that. She read it twice. Then she closed her laptop and sat very still. Just filling in, that's what it looked like from the outside. She'd thought she was integral, essential, family. She was a substitute. That weekend, she drafted her resignation letter. It took her 6 hours. She wrote it a dozen different ways, trying to find the balance between honesty and professionalism, between anger and grace. She wanted to tell him everything, how small he'd made her feel, how invisible, how easily replaced. She wanted him to understand what he'd done, but in the end, she kept it simple. I've accepted a position elsewhere. My last day will be March 15th. Thank you for the opportunity. I wish you all the best. She sent it on Monday morning. Then she made herself a cup of tea and waited. He called her an hour later. What's going on? His voice was tight, confused. Did something happen? Did someone say something? No, she said. I just think it's time. Time for what? He sounded genuinely baffled. I don't understand. You're happy here. You said you were happy. She had been, once. I need to do something different, she said. I've been here a long time. But... He stopped. She could hear him breathing. Okay. Can we talk about this? Can I take you to lunch? I don't think that's necessary. Please. She agreed. She didn't know why. Maybe because some part of her still hoped he would apologize, that he would see her, finally, that he would acknowledge what she'd given and what he'd taken. They met at a restaurant she'd chosen. Neutral territory, midday light, half-empty tables, somewhere she could leave easily if she needed to. He arrived late, apologetic, flustered, checking his phone twice before sitting down. Sorry, crazy morning, you know how it is, she did. She'd managed his crazy mornings for 7 years. He ordered wine, she ordered water. So, he said, leaning forward, hands clasped on the table, his listening posture, the one he used in donor meetings. Talk to me, what's really going on? She looked at him, at his familiar face, the concern in his eyes that felt almost genuine, almost. I need to leave, she said. That's all. That's not all, he frowned. Come on. We've worked together too long for you to shut me out like this. If I did something... You didn't, she said. And then, before she could stop herself, not one thing, 1,000 small things. Things you didn't even notice. He stared at her. Like what? She thought about the gala. She thought about his father's face. She thought about every email that had ended with "You're incredible," but never with "I couldn't do this without you," even though both were true. The gala, she said quietly. Do you remember the gala? He blinked. Of course, it was amazing. You were amazing. Do you remember seeing me there? A pause. She watched him search his memory, trying to locate the moment. I saw you, he he said slowly. You were by the bar, I think. I was with my dad. Yes. Okay. And she waited. She wanted him to remember on his own, to realize what he'd done. He didn't. And you walked past me, she said. You looked at me and you kept walking? He frowned, confused. I was bringing my dad to meet the board chair. I couldn't stop in the middle of... You told him I was a friend of his, not yours. His. The words hung between them. He stared at her. His mouth opened, closed. I didn't, he started, then stopped. I don't remember saying that. You did. His face changed. Not guilt, not quite, something more complicated. The expression of someone realizing they've done something they can't undo and aren't sure they should apologize for. I was trying to keep things simple, he said finally. My dad doesn't always remember people. I didn't want to make it awkward. For him. For everyone. He rubbed his face. You're taking this the wrong way. What's the right way? I don't know. His voice rose slightly. The couple at the next table glanced over. He lowered his voice. I don't know what you want me to say. That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. But he didn't sound sorry. He sounded frustrated, inconvenienced. She realized sitting there that he'd never seen her. Not really. He'd seen what she could do for him. The way she made his life easier, smoother, better. He'd been grateful for that. Maybe he'd even liked her, in the way you like someone who anticipates your needs and never asks for anything in return. But he'd never seen her as equal, as someone whose feelings mattered as much as his convenience. She'd been family the way a good assistant is family, reliable, present, invisible when necessary. I know you didn't mean to, she said. That's the problem. She worked out her 2 weeks, professional to the end. He was polite, distant, faintly injured. He stopped asking her opinion on things. He hired her replacement, a recent college graduate with an impressive resume and an eagerness that reminded her of herself 7 years ago. She trained the new assistant carefully, showed her the donor database, the budget spreadsheets, the list of his preferences she'd compiled over the years. She warned her about nothing. On her last day, he gave her a card and a gift certificate to a restaurant she'd mentioned liking. The card said, "You'll be missed," in his handwriting, professional, warm, final. She cleaned out her desk while he was in a meeting. She didn't say goodbye. 6 months later, she saw him at a fundraiser. Different organization, different city. She was there with her new boss, a woman, younger than him, sharper, who introduced her to people as my director of development and meant it. She saw him across the room before he saw her. He was laughing, holding a drink, his hand on someone's shoulder. The same gestures, the same easy charm. When he finally noticed her, his face lit up. Genuine pleasure. He crossed the room, arms open. Hey! Oh my God, how are you? You look great. She smiled. I'm well. You? Good, good. Crazy busy, but, you know. He laughed, glanced around. Are you here with someone? My boss, she said, nodding toward the woman, talking to a cluster of board members. Dr. Chen, she runs the foundation. That's great. That's so great. He looked at her more closely. You seem really good. Happy. I am. He nodded. A small silence opened between them. She could see him searching for something to say, some way to bridge the gap that had always been there, but that she'd only recently named. Listen, he said. I've been meaning to reach out. I just wanted to say... He paused. I'm sorry if things ended badly. I wish you talked to me. We could have worked it out. She looked at him, at his familiar face, his hopeful expression. He believed what he was saying. He truly thought that's all it would have taken, a conversation, an adjustment, a little more effort on her part. She could have explained. She could have told him that you can't work out an imbalance someone doesn't believe exists, that loyalty only matters if it's mutual, that family doesn't mean someone you take care of. It means someone who takes care of you too. But he wouldn't understand, not really. And she was tired of trying to make people see what should have been obvious. It's okay, she said. I'm glad things worked out the way they did. Yeah? He smiled, relieved. Good, that's good. Her boss caught her eye across the room. She nodded. I should go, she said. It was good to see you. You too, really? She walked away. She didn't look back. Later that night, in the car home, her boss asked if she knew that guy. Used to work for him, she said. How was it? She looked out the window at the city lights sliding past, thought about all the mornings she'd arrived early, all the nights she'd stayed late, all the times she'd rearranged her life to accommodate his. Thought about the gala, his father's face, the exact angle of his head when he leaned in to explain that she was no one worth knowing. It taught me a lot, she said. Her boss laughed. That's one way to put it. It was. She never saw him again. Sometimes she wondered if he ever understood what had happened, if he ever connected the moment at the gala to the resignation letter, if he told people she'd left without warning, without reason, if he felt betrayed. She hoped he did. Just a little. But mostly she stopped thinking about it. She built a new career, made new friends, learned to recognize the difference between being valued and being useful. She became someone who said no when she needed to, someone who left at 5:30 without guilt, someone who knew her worth and didn't need anyone else to confirm it. Years later, she would see his name in an alumni magazine, a profile about his promotion, his success, his commitment to mentorship. There was a photo of him at a gala, not the one she'd planned, but similar. He was smiling, surrounded by colleagues, looking exactly the same. She read the article once. Then she closed the magazine and made herself tea. She thought about the girl she'd been at 25. How eager, how grateful, how willing to be small if it meant being included. She thought about all of the things she'd given away, believing they were investments. All the ways she'd diminished herself to make space for someone else's comfort. She didn't regret leaving. She regretted how long it had taken, but she'd learned. And in the end, that was enough. Some people never see you clearly, not because you're invisible, but because they've decided what you're for. And anything beyond that is inconvenient. They call it loyalty when you serve them. They call it betrayal when you stop. The truth is simpler. You were always visible. They just never looked up from their own reflection long enough to notice.